The sound of marble cracking echoed across St. Catherine's Elementary courtyard like a gunshot. 37 children stopped mid-play, their laughter dying in their throats as they watched 8-year-old Benjamin Torres step back from what he had just done. The Virgin Mary statue that had stood peacefully in the school's heart for 40 years now bore a jagged wound. Her outstretched hand lay in pieces on the concrete below. Sister Margaret dropped her coffee mug on the second-floor window ledge, the ceramic shattering as she witnessed the unthinkable. Benjamin's small chest heaved with rage, his dark eyes blazing with a fury no child should carry. The other children backed away, some already crying, not from fear of punishment, but from a deep, inexplicable sense that something sacred had been violated. "What have you done?" whispered Emma, his classmate, her voice barely audible over the playground's sudden silence. Benjamin turned to face the circle of shocked faces surrounding him, his fists still clenched, tears streaming down his dirt-stained cheeks. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came, only a sound that was part sob, part scream, part something else entirely. Before we go deeper into this mystery, take a moment to subscribe to Virgin Mary Mysteries. Stories like this are too powerful to experience alone. If you're watching this story unfold, comment below with your location and the words, "Merciful Mother." Let's create a chain of prayer across the world for children like Benjamin who carry pain too heavy for their young hearts. Principal Valdez reached the courtyard within minutes, her rosary beads clicking as she ran. The sight before her defied belief. Benjamin Torres, one of their quietest students, standing amid the wreckage of their beloved statue. But it was the look in his eyes that stopped her cold. This wasn't mere mischief or accident. This was the desperate act of a child whose world had shattered long before he ever touched that marble hand. The janitor, elderly Mr. Castillo, knelt carefully beside the broken pieces. He had worked at St. Catherine's for 23 years, had seen everything a school could offer, fights, tears, triumphs, heartbreaks. But as he gathered the fragments of the Virgin's hand, something caught his attention. The break wasn't rough or random. It was clean, almost surgical, as if the marble had given way willingly. "Benjamin," Principal Valdez spoke softly, approaching the boy as she would a wounded animal. "Can you tell me why?" Benjamin's lips trembled. His eyes darted between the broken statue and the woman before him. When he finally spoke, his words were barely a whisper, but they would echo through the halls of St. Catherine's for months to come. She wasn't listening anyway. The ambulance arrived before anyone had called it. No one could explain how paramedics knew to come to the school, but they found Benjamin collapsed on the courtyard bench, burning with fever. As they loaded him onto a stretcher, Mr. Castillo made the sign of the cross and whispered a prayer that would prove more prophetic than he could imagine. What none of them knew yet was that this was only the beginning, and that sometimes the greatest miracles begin with the most broken hearts. 6 months before Benjamin Torres's foot connected with marble, his father's pickup truck had pulled away from their small apartment on Maple Street for the last time. Luis Torres left behind only empty beer bottles, unpaid bills, and the lingering smell of disappointment that seemed to permeate every corner of their 2-bedroom home. Benjamin had pressed his face against the kitchen window that morning, watching the red taillights disappear into traffic, not understanding that his childhood was disappearing with them. Maria Torres worked 3 jobs to keep their world from completely falling apart. Mornings at the bakery starting at 4 a.m., afternoons cleaning offices downtown, evenings stocking shelves at the grocery store. She left Benjamin with neighbors, relatives, anyone who would watch an 8-year-old boy whose eyes had grown too serious, too quickly. The exhaustion carved deep lines around her eyes, and her prayers had become desperate whispers between shifts. "Virgencita, help me be enough for him." Benjamin's anger had been building like storm clouds on a summer horizon. It started small, slamming doors, refusing to eat, picking fights with classmates who still had fathers to pick them up after school. But it was the statue that became the focus of his rage. Every morning as he walked through St. Catherine's courtyard, the Virgin Mary stood there with her arms outstretched, her marble face serene and unchanging, promising protection and peace to a boy who felt neither. The statue had been commissioned in 1983 by the school's founding families, carved from Carrara marble by an Italian artist whose grandmother had prayed the rosary in the ruins of bombed churches during World War II. For 40 years, it had weathered Denver's harsh winters and blazing summers, had witnessed thousands of children grow up in its shadow. Teachers often found students sitting quietly on the bench beside it during difficult times, after failed tests, friendship troubles, family crises. The Virgin's presence had been a constant source of comfort, but to Benjamin, she had become a symbol of everything that wasn't working. Every day, he would stop before her and whisper angry questions. Why didn't you keep my dad here? Why doesn't my mum smile anymore? Why doesn't anyone care? The marble face never changed expression. The outstretched hands never moved to comfort him. The silence felt like rejection. Mrs. Chen, the crossing guard, had noticed Benjamin's daily ritual with growing concern. She watched him linger by the statue each morning, his small shoulders rigid with tension. Sometimes she caught him wiping tears on his sleeve before joining his classmates. Once, she heard him shout at the statue, "You're supposed to help families. You're supposed to make things better." The fury in his voice made her clutch her own rosary beads tighter. The night before the incident, Benjamin had knelt beside his bed, as his mother had taught him. But instead of gentle prayers, he had issued an ultimatum to heaven. "If you don't bring my dad home tomorrow, I'm done with all of this." He had fallen asleep, waiting for an answer that never came, not knowing that sometimes the most profound responses require first breaking what seems beyond repair. By morning, his 8-year-old heart had hardened into determination. The statue would finally feel what he felt: abandoned, broken, ignored. The fever struck Benjamin like lightning 3 hours after the statue incident. One moment he was sitting in Principal Valdez's office, staring at his hands still dusty with marble powder. The next, he was burning from the inside out. His temperature spiked to 104.2 degrees Fahrenheit, sending the school nurse into immediate panic. No gradual onset. No warning signs, just a child suddenly consumed by heat that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than illness. In the ambulance rushing toward Denver Children's Hospital, Benjamin's small body convulsed with chills despite the fire raging through him. Paramedic Sarah Rodriguez had seen countless pediatric fevers in her 12-year career, but something about this one felt different. The boy's lips moved constantly, forming words she couldn't quite catch over the sirens. His eyes remained closed, but tears streamed down his flushed cheeks in an endless flow that had nothing to do with physical pain. Mr. Castillo followed the ambulance in his old Honda, his weathered hands gripping the steering wheel. As the school's janitor for over 2 decades, he had witnessed the accident more clearly than anyone else. What haunted him wasn't the sound of breaking marble or the children's screams. It was the precise moment when Benjamin's foot had made contact. For just an instant, the elderly man could have sworn he saw something impossible. A flash of brilliant light emanating from the statue's face, too brief to be real, yet too vivid to forget. At the hospital, Dr. Patricia Hernandez ran every test available. Blood work, CT scans, spinal taps, viral panels, everything came back normal. Benjamin's white cell count was perfect. His brain showed no signs of trauma or infection. His organs functioned flawlessly. Yet the fever persisted, defying medical explanation. It's as if his body is burning off something we can't measure. She confided to the head nurse during her 3rd examination. If this story is pulling you in, subscribe now and tell me in the comments what you believe is really happening. Your insight might reveal something we haven't seen yet, but it was Benjamin's delirium that truly unnerved the medical staff. Throughout the night, as his mother sat beside the bed clutching a worn rosary, Benjamin repeated the same phrase over and over. "She forgives me, she forgives me, she forgives me." His voice was barely a whisper, but the words were crystal clear. When nurses asked who forgave him, his only response was a peaceful smile that seemed completely at odds with his fevered state. Mr. Castillo arrived at 2 a.m., carrying something wrapped in a small towel. He found Maria Torres praying silently in the hallway, her work uniform still stained with flour from the early morning shift she'd abandoned. "Senora," he said gently, "I brought something." He unwrapped a single piece of the statue's broken hand, a small fragment no bigger than a coin. "I found this after they took your boy away. It was warm to the touch, and it's stayed warm ever since." Maria stared at the marble piece, then at the old man's sincere eyes. "What does it mean?" she asked. Before Mr. Castillo could answer, Benjamin's voice drifted from the room. "Tell her I understand now. Tell her I'm ready to listen." The nurses exchanged glances, knowing no one had entered the boy's room for hours. What none of them realized yet was that Benjamin was no longer alone in his hospital bed, and the fever was about to break in a way that would challenge everything they believed about healing. 3 days later, Benjamin walked through the gates of St. Catherine's Elementary with legs that felt like lead. The fever had broken at dawn on the second day, leaving him weak but strangely peaceful. His mother walked beside him, her grip on his hand gentle but firm. Word of the statue incident had spread through the neighborhood like wildfire, and Maria Torres steeled herself for the judgment she was certain awaited them both. But nothing could have prepared them for what they found in the courtyard. The Virgin Mary stood exactly as she had for 40 years, her marble hands extended in perfect condition. No cracks, no repairs, no evidence that anything had ever been broken. Benjamin stopped so suddenly that his mother nearly stumbled. His mouth fell open, eyes wide with disbelief. "Mommy," he whispered. "Her hand. It's—" "I know, mijo," Maria breathed, making the sign of the cross. "I know." A small crowd had gathered around the statue since early morning. Parents dropping off their children, teachers on their way to class, maintenance workers, all stood in stunned silence, staring at what appeared to be an impossibility. Mr. Castillo was among them, the marble fragment from Benjamin's hospital visit clutched in his palm. When he opened his hand to check, the piece had vanished, leaving only the faint scent of roses on his skin. Sister Agnes emerged from the crowd, her habit rustling softly as she approached Benjamin. At 73, she had taught at St. Catherine's for over 4 decades, had seen miracles and heartbreaks in equal measure. But the look in Benjamin's eyes as he stared at the restored statue was unlike anything she had witnessed. Where once there had been rage and desperation, now there was something else. A depth of understanding that seemed impossible in someone so young. "Benjamin," she said gently, kneeling to his level, "how do you feel about what you see?" The boy's answer came without hesitation. "She was never really broken, was she? It was me who was broken." Principal Valdez had planned disciplinary measures, parent conferences, possible suspension. But facing this transformed child and the inexplicable restoration of their beloved statue, the words died in her throat. How do you punish a miracle? How do you explain what defies explanation? The real mystery deepened during morning assembly when Emma Martinez raised her hand during prayer time. "Sister Agnes," the 7-year-old said with unusual solemnity, "I had the same dream 3 nights in a row. The lady in white told me to be kind to Benjamin because he has something important to do." A murmur rippled through the classroom. Tommy O'Connor nodded vigorously. "Me too. She said Benjamin was going to help someone who really needs it." One by one, 17 children shared variations of the same impossible dream, a gentle woman in flowing robes speaking about Benjamin, about forgiveness, about watching for signs. Sister Agnes felt a chill run down her spine. In all her years of teaching, she had never encountered anything like this. Children occasionally shared dreams about school or friends, but never with such specificity, never with such unified detail. Benjamin sat quietly during these revelations, his small hands folded in prayer position, tears sliding silently down his cheeks. The final bell had barely rung when the first call came into the principal's office. A frantic voice on the other end. "Please, you have to help us. It's about the Torres boy. There's been another miracle." The man standing in Principal Valdez's doorway looked like a stranger wearing Luis Torres's face. 3 days of stubble covered his hollow cheeks, his work clothes wrinkled and stained with motor oil, and his bloodshot eyes held the desperate look of someone who had driven through the night without rest. But it was definitely Benjamin's father, the same man who had walked away 6 months ago. "I need to see my son," Luis said, his voice rough with exhaustion and something that sounded dangerously close to fear. Principal Valdez studied the man before her carefully. Luis Torres gripped a crumpled piece of paper in his trembling hand, covered in his own handwriting. "Mr. Torres," she began cautiously, "Benjamin is in class, and I'm not sure." "She told me to come back," Luis interrupted, his voice cracking. 3 nights in a row, the same dream. A woman in blue, standing in light so bright I could barely look at her face. She said my boy needed me, that he was in danger of losing himself to anger just like I did. He held up the paper with shaking hands. I wrote down everything she said, word for word. Things about Benjamin I couldn't possibly know. Meanwhile, in Sister Agnes's classroom, Benjamin suddenly stood up from his desk during math lesson. His face had gone pale, and his small body began to tremble. "He's here," the boy whispered, staring toward the door. "I can feel him. My papa's here." Sister Agnes knelt beside Benjamin's desk, her heart racing. "How do you know Benjamin?" "She told me he would come when he was ready to listen," Benjamin replied, tears beginning to stream down his cheeks. "But I'm scared, sister. What if he leaves again?" In the principal's office, Luis Torres read aloud from his crumpled notes. "Tell Luis his son kicks statues when his heart is breaking, just like Luis breaks bottles when his own pain becomes too much. Tell him that anger passed from father to son can be healed, but only if he chooses love over pride." Principal Valdez felt goosebumps rise on her arms. No one outside the school community knew the specific details of Benjamin's incident with the statue. Yet here was a man who had been gone for months, recounting details with impossible accuracy. "There's more," Luis continued, his voice barely a whisper. "She said Benjamin would be waiting by the statue, and that when I see him there, I'll understand what I've been running from." At that exact moment, as if summoned by invisible forces, Benjamin appeared in the courtyard, not walking, but running toward the Virgin Mary statue with desperate urgency. Sister Agnes followed close behind, calling his name, but the boy didn't stop until he reached the marble figure that had started everything. There, in the shadow of restored holiness, father and son would face each other across a chasm of abandonment and pain, but neither could predict what would happen when divine grace collided with human brokenness. The reunion in the courtyard lasted only 17 minutes, but those 17 minutes changed 3 lives forever. Luis Torres fell to his knees before his son, his proud shoulders finally breaking under the weight of 6 months' worth of suppressed grief. Benjamin, after a moment of paralyzing fear, ran into his father's arms with a sob that seemed to echo off every brick wall of St. Catherine's. And watching from the school's front steps, Maria Torres witnessed something she thought she'd never see again, her broken family attempting to heal. But it was what happened later that evening that truly defied explanation. Maria had not prayed, really prayed, since the night Luis left. That awful evening when she had knelt beside their bed, rosary beads slipping through trembling fingers, begging God to bring her husband home to his son. When morning came and Luis was gone anyway, she had quietly boxed away her faith along with his belongings. Prayer, she decided, was for people whose hearts hadn't been shattered by unanswered pleas. Yet somehow, at 9:47 p.m. on the night of the reunion, Maria found herself standing in St. Catherine's courtyard. She had no memory of deciding to come, no recollection of getting in her car or driving through the empty streets. One moment she was washing dishes in her kitchen, thinking about Luis sleeping on their couch for the first time in half a year, and the next she was here, staring at the statue that had somehow brought her family back together. The Virgin Mary's marble face seemed different in the moonlight, softer somehow, more approachable than the stern figure Maria remembered from her childhood. Without conscious thought, she pulled a small white candle from her purse, one she didn't remember buying, and lit it with a match that appeared in her hand as if placed there by invisible fingers. "I don't know what you want from us," Maria whispered to the statue, her voice breaking in the cool night air. "I don't understand what's happening to my son, to my husband, to any of us." Tears began flowing freely, months of suppressed pain finally finding release. "But if this is really you working in our lives, if Benjamin somehow reached you when his little heart was so broken..." She couldn't finish the sentence. Instead, she fell to her knees on the damp grass, her hands pressed against the statue's marble base. The stone was warm to her touch, impossibly warm given the October chill, and she felt something she hadn't experienced in years, peace that surpassed understanding. As Maria wept before the Virgin, her tears seemed to wash away layers of bitterness, resentment, and fear. For the first time since Luis left, she felt hope, real hope that their family might survive, that Benjamin's anger might heal, that love might be stronger than the pain they'd all carried. But even as this profound healing began, Maria had no way of knowing that the greatest test of their newfound faith was already forming on the horizon, and that within 48 hours, everything they believed about miracles would be challenged by an event that would shake St. Catherine's community to its very foundation. The storm arrived without warning on Thursday afternoon, transforming Denver's clear autumn sky into a churning mass of black clouds that seemed to boil with unnatural fury. By 3:15 p.m., hail the size of golf balls was pounding the city, shattering car windshields and driving everyone indoors. The National Weather Service issued emergency warnings as winds reached 70 miles per hour, turning everyday objects into dangerous projectiles. At St. Catherine's Elementary, Principal Valdez ordered an immediate lockdown. Teachers pulled children away from windows as the building shook under the storm's assault. In the basement shelter, 37 students huddled together while Sister Agnes led them in quiet prayer, her voice barely audible above the howling wind that seemed determined to tear the school apart, brick by brick. But Benjamin Torres was not in the basement. As the first thunder had rumbled overhead, the 8-year-old had felt an overwhelming compulsion to be in the courtyard. Despite his teacher's protests, despite the obvious danger, he had slipped away during the evacuation chaos. Now he stood 20 feet from the Virgin Mary statue, rain soaking through his school uniform, his dark hair plastered against his skull as he stared at something the others couldn't see. The destruction around the courtyard was absolute. Ancient oak trees that had stood for decades lay twisted and broken, their massive trunks snapped like toothpicks. The school's cafeteria windows had been blown out completely, glass scattered across the parking lot like deadly diamonds. Mr. Castillo's maintenance shed had been lifted off its foundation and hurled against the gymnasium wall, reduced to splinters and twisted metal. Yet in a perfect circle around the Virgin Mary statue, extending exactly 12 feet in every direction, not a single leaf had been disturbed. Benjamin stood at the edge of this impossible sanctuary, rain streaming down his face, mixed with tears of understanding. The wind that had demolished everything else seemed to part around this sacred space like water flowing around a stone. Even the hail, which continued to pound the rest of the courtyard with violent intensity, simply vanished as it approached the statue's protective boundary. "I see now," Benjamin whispered to the Virgin Mary, his small voice somehow carrying clearly despite the storm's rage. "You weren't ignoring me before. You were protecting me from my own anger, just like you're protecting me now." Giddy, he stepped forward into the circle of calm, and immediately the wind died away to gentle stillness. "I thought you weren't listening, but you were waiting for me to be ready to hear." From the basement window, Sister Agnes caught a glimpse of the impossible scene above. She made the sign of the cross with trembling fingers, understanding that she was witnessing something that would be remembered long after the storm passed. But she also saw something else that filled her with dread. A massive electrical transformer was breaking loose from its moorings, swaying dangerously above the courtyard. In 30 seconds, it would fall directly toward Benjamin and the statue, carrying enough voltage to kill instantly. But the boy seemed completely unaware, lost in his moment of divine communion, finally at peace with the forces that had brought such chaos to his young life. The electrical transformer fell exactly where Sister Agnes knew it would, directly toward Benjamin and the statue with devastating force. But in the moment of impact, witnesses reported seeing something that defied every law of physics they understood. The massive metal structure simply stopped mid-air, suspended 3 feet above Benjamin's head for nearly 10 seconds before gently lowering itself to the ground beside the protective circle, its deadly wires sparking harmlessly against wet pavement. Emergency responders found Benjamin sitting peacefully beside the Virgin Mary statue an hour later, completely dry despite the continuing rainfall. He was humming a song none of them recognized, a melody both ancient and otherworldly that seemed to calm everyone who heard it. When they asked what had happened, he simply smiled and said, "She caught it. She caught everything that was trying to hurt me." The transformation in Benjamin Torres became evident within days. Teachers noticed it first, the way he moved through the hallways with quiet purpose instead of restless anger, how he helped younger children who were struggling, the way he instinctively comforted classmates who were upset. His small hands, once clenched in constant fists, now remained open and gentle. His eyes, previously clouded with rage, had gained a depth that seemed impossible in someone so young. "It's as if he's carrying peace inside him now," Sister Agnes confided to Principal Valdez during a faculty meeting. "Yesterday, I watched him stop a playground fight just by walking between the 2 boys and asking them to pray with him. They did it without question. 8-year-olds don't usually have that kind of spiritual authority." The school community began viewing the statue differently as well. Where once it had been simply a beautiful religious sculpture, now it had become a testament to redemption. Parents started bringing their own troubled children to sit quietly beside it. Visiting priests asked to hear the story firsthand. Local news stations requested interviews, though the school politely declined, understanding that some mysteries were too sacred for public consumption. Maria and Luis Torres renewed their wedding vows in a quiet ceremony beside the statue on a crisp November morning. Benjamin stood between them as they exchanged promises, his small hands holding both of theirs. Father Martinez, who performed the ceremony, later described feeling an unusual presence during the service, a warmth that had nothing to do with the autumn sun, a sense of profound blessing that brought tears to his eyes. But the greatest change was in Benjamin's prayer life. Every morning before school, he would arrive early to spend 15 minutes in quiet conversation with the Virgin Mary. Not the angry demands of his past, but gentle whispers of gratitude and requests for guidance. Students passing by often heard fragments. "Help Michael with his mum's sickness," or "Show Sarah she's not alone," or "Teach me to be kinder today." Mr. Castillo, cleaning the courtyard each evening, sometimes found small gifts left at the statue's base: flowers, handwritten prayers, rosary beads, photographs of family members in need of healing. The elderly janitor carefully collected these offerings and placed them in a special box he kept in his maintenance closet, understanding that he was witnessing the birth of something holy. Yet questions remained. What had really happened to the angry little boy who kicked the statue? How does a child's heart transform so completely? And why did some people, looking into Benjamin's eyes now, feel as though they were glimpsing something far older and wiser than 8 years could possibly contain? 6 months have passed since Benjamin Torres kicked the Virgin Mary statue at St. Catherine's Elementary, and the boy who stands before it each morning bears little resemblance to the angry child whose broken heart had lashed out in desperate fury. Now, 10 years old, Benjamin has grown taller, but it's the light in his eyes that truly marks his transformation, a gentle radiance that illuminates everyone around him. The statue has become something of a pilgrimage site, though quietly so. Families drive from across Colorado to bring their troubled children to sit in the courtyard, hoping for healing. Principal Valdez keeps a registry of prayer requests left at the statue's base, documenting over 200 answered prayers in the months since Benjamin's incident, healings, reconciliations, and spiritual awakenings that defy explanation. Benjamin never speaks publicly about his experience. When curious adults ask, he simply smiles and says, "Sometimes when we think we're breaking something, we're really just breaking through to what we needed all along." His wisdom has become legendary among teachers. The morning ritual continues unchanged. Every day at 7:15 a.m., Benjamin arrives early to spend time with the Virgin Mary statue. He no longer prays for his father to return. Those prayers were answered long ago. Instead, his whispered conversations focus on others, classmates struggling with divorce, neighbors facing illness, children in distant places who need protection. Maria Torres, now working only one job thanks to Luis's steady return, often watches her son from their apartment window. She sees him walking to school with unhurried steps, pausing to help elderly neighbors or comfort crying children. "He's become what I always prayed he would be," she tells her sister, "but in ways I never could have imagined." The marble hand Benjamin once shattered now extends in perfect wholeness. Art experts have examined the statue multiple times, searching for evidence of repair work, only to confirm what the community already knew. The restoration was complete, seamless, and utterly impossible by human standards. If this story moved you, subscribe to Virgin Mary Mysteries so you never miss the next chapter in these extraordinary mysteries. Today, Benjamin is in 4th grade, earning straight A's through the focus that comes from a peaceful heart. He volunteers in the school library, helps younger students, and has never once raised his voice in anger since that transformative October day. As you watch this story unfold, you witness something profound, a child's broken heart becoming a vessel for divine grace. If Benjamin's journey touched your soul, write "broken but beautiful" in the comments below. Let these 3 words become our prayer for every hurting heart that needs to know healing is possible. The Virgin Mary still stands in St. Catherine's courtyard, her marble hands outstretched in eternal welcome, waiting for the next broken heart brave enough to approach her presence. And sometimes, if you listen carefully in the early morning quiet, you might hear a young boy's voice whispering prayers for the whole world's healing.